Hey guys, I hope you're hungry. Welcome back to War Stories. My name is Jericho. This is the Full Ensigns channel, and today's going to be the first episode of a new sort of sub-series in War Stories called Legends, after the former Star Wars Expanded Universe continuity. Because hashtag give us legends, hashtag legends never die. We're going to keep it going by spreading, the good word of what these stories once contained and once meant to a bunch of people. So in today's episode, is the Legend of Lando. As you can see from the title and description, I'm going to be talking about Lando's story as it existed in the former expanded universe. So a lot of this stuff is no longer canon, of course, much to my disappointment. But who knows what they may end up, using or referencing in later movies. Some of this stuff we mentioned in our Han Solo movie discussion with Iceman, but a lot of it is going to be new to, I'm sure, a lot of people, and I think it's interesting stories. And we'll continue this. We'll do the Legend of Dengar, Legend of Greedo, maybe, and just kind of move through some of these great characters, and just tell the stories that I have always held dear about them. And a lot of this stuff was detailed in the Han Solo trilogy by A.C. Crispin, which was one of the first pieces of expanded universe literature I read as a kid. So pretty much all of this is just from memory. It's just stuff I know about Lando Calrissian. So Lando, his origins as like a child are shrouded in mystery, a lot like Han. And much like Han, he doesn't even know all the answers, and he himself is responsible for some of the confusion. Time to gamble. Kind of like the Joker. He prefers his past to be multiple choice, as they say. But he grew up, already a card shark, a gambler, a scoundrel. You'd like him, as Han said to Leia. But you can't really talk about Lando without discussing the game that he was really a master of, Sabacc. So Sabacc is sort of a big card game in the Star Wars world. I think it might still be canon. I'm pretty sure it's been mentioned in some canon source or another by now, that it's still, so it still matters. But anyway, it's sort of a cross between poker and blackjack. So when you play Sabacc, you have your hand of cards like poker, but instead of just having different combinations of cards that beat others like poker, there's only two things you can do. You're trying to get as close to 23 as possible, but there's both positive and negative cards, all of which are face cards. So you have, I remember one is like the Queen of Air and Darkness, and there's the Ace, the Idiot, like all sorts of different cards, and they all have positive and negative values. So when you add them together in your hand, you want to get as close to positive or negative 23 as possible. But what makes Sabacc interesting is there's a different way to win. If you have the Idiot, a card equaling 2 and a card equaling 3, which is like literally 23, which is the goal of the game, is the very best hand of all. It's called an Idiot's Array. But just to make things a little bit more crazy, all the cards are, of course, electronic, and their values can be randomized at any time. So you could have like the best hand in the world, and then all of a sudden they get randomized, and you end up with garbage. Or vice versa. You could have nothing, and then out of nowhere you have pure Sabacc, which is exactly 23, positive or negative. So the interference field you can place cards into to protect their value from changing. But if you dump your whole hand in there, they're gonna call your bluff. Like, obviously you have a great hand. So it's a game of bluffing and all that sort of good stuff, just like poker or whatever. But the addition of the randomized card values is really what makes it pretty unique. And thus far not really replicatable in the real world. So Lando was the original owner, well, not the original owner, but before Han, he was the owner of the Millennium Falcon. He won it in a game of Sabacc, and as sort of becomes the through line of his life, he later loses it in Sabacc to Han. Lando taunted, bluffed that he had an Idiot's Array. Han Solo had pure Sabacc in a tournament in Cloud City, and Han won the Millennium Falcon from him. But they actually met a few years before that. Han had acquired the Millennium Falcon in the first place, you know, in a game, and he heard about a pilot named Han Solo on the smuggler's moon of Nar Shaddaa, which was just sort of like a hideout for, you know, low lives, specifically Corellians like Han. It was where Han was living at the time, working for, you know, small-time gun runners and stuff to, you know, make his original fortune. So Lando had heard of Han and was interested in talking to him about piloting lessons, because Han now has this ship, the Millennium Falcon, and doesn't know how to pilot it. When he met Han, Han was actually in the process of getting captured by Boba Fett. With Lando's help, they are able to surprise and defeat the bounty hunter, which begins the lifelong enmity between Han Solo and Boba Fett. And Han teaches Lando how to fly. So years later, he loses the Falcon to Han in the game of Sabacc. It's interesting. So Lando also owned a used spaceship lot at the time on Nar Shaddaa. So when Lando wasn't able to cover his bet in the big Sabacc game against Han, he said, "Okay, here's what I'll tell you. Here's what we'll do. I can't cover your bet, so here's a marker that's good for any ship on my lot." So when Han won the game, Lando expected Han to pick, you know, one of his other used spaceships, but as it happened, the Millennium Falcon happened to be sitting on Lando's lot because he wanted to arrive on a fancy, basically space limousine, so that he could bluff better, because it seemed like he has so much money to lose because he's arriving in such style. So since the Millennium Falcon was on his lot, Han scooped it up, which kind of resulted in Lando acting as if Han had stolen the Falcon from him. But that is not, however, the reason that Lando and Han had their big falling out that resulted in Han's comment of, you know, that was a long time ago, I'm sure he's forgotten about that. That was Han's first dealings with the rebels. At the time, Han had a girlfriend named Bria Theron, and they wanted to pull a big operation on the world of Elysia, where they manufactured spice, which is essentially Star Wars drugs. The rebels wanted to destroy the factories, free all the slaves that made the drugs, and steal the drugs to sell them to fund, you know, the early rebellion war effort. Unbeknownst to Han, they had no intention of actually paying the smugglers they hired to help with the operation, and they all got betrayed. Lando figured Han was in on it, and that led to a rift between them that lasted for years. When Han first arrived at Cloud City, was the first time he had spoken to his friend in some time. It is all because of that, you know, betrayal by the rebels that, unfortunately, Han knew nothing about. But so Lando betrays him. You know, you got to believe that that earlier enmity and distrust of the rebels sort of led to it. But you know, sees the light at the end and joins the rebellion. In Return of the Jedi, first of all, this is a cool aside. When he is a skiff guard, his name is Tamtel Screech. Everybody needs a fake identity, so he's Tamtel. He's Tamtel Screech. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So when we meet Lando, he's the Baron Administrator of Cloud City, and how he got that is also a sort of an interesting story. Once again, he was in a card game. He was in a big Sabacc tournament, and he was playing against the Baron Administrator, who cheated. There are special cards called skifters that you can change their value by tapping them in a certain way. So Lando's opponent, the former Baron Administrator, or the current at the time, used the skifter to cheat, and Lando was out of money and out of the game. However, he received 5 million credits from an unknown benefactor. He used that and bet 4 million credits and his used spaceship lot against the Baron Administratorship of Cloud City, and was able to win. And it turns out that the person that did that was the cyborg Lobot, who's the guy with the crazy, like, backwards Cyclops visor that you see in Empire Strikes Back. Lobot and the Ugnaughts, the little guys that were messing with C-3PO, they, and Lobot wanted the former Baron Administrator to lose his job. So it was worth it to them to you know, raise all this money just to defeat, you know, just to make sure that Lando was able to be successful in getting rid of the former Baron Administrator, because he was so terrible. So thanks to that, Lando is able to take control, and he says running Cloud City, at first, he sort of treated it as a joke and had Lando do all the work and wasn't really interested in the city or its people. But that was the beginning of him becoming respectable, as Han mentions in their meeting in Episode 5. And he does start to take it seriously and considers running Cloud City the strangest scam he's ever run. As he really becomes, a good Baron administrator that really cares for the city and its people and how he can help them, and all the problems he mentions of a respectable man, become worth it to him. But anyway, as I was saying, he sees the light, joins the rebellion, and thanks to his maneuver at the Battle of Tanab, he becomes a general and is put into a position of power and leadership going into the Battle of Endor, which is to say, of course, the Battle of the Second Death Star. This maneuver at the Battle of Tanab, so Lando was at Tanab, and they were about to be attacked by pirates. Lando's maneuver that won him such acclaim and a position as high as a general in the Alliance military, he hid amongst the asteroids just by himself in a single ship and used nets that the pirates couldn't detect. With those nets, he trapped the pirate ships and then had the citizens of Tanab use tractor beams to launch huge chunks of ice at the pirate vessels. So Lando basically single-handedly destroys 19 pirate ships and saves Tanab from the invasion. And this maneuver, wins him his acclaim and eventually, the position within the Alliance military. Lando, of course, teams with Wedge Antilles to destroy the second Death Star, unfortunately damaging the Falcon's sensor dish in the process, as we see when he's flying into the Death Star 2, that was too close, is actually when the top of the sensor dish gets clipped off by the roof, the top of the little trench he's trying to fly into. But they are successful. He destroys the second Death Star, and Lando, he's still a card shark, still plays games, still a gambler and all the rest of it, but he remains, a pretty, on again, off again member of the Alliance as it becomes, the New Republic, and he helps to shape the future of the galaxy. 18 years after the Battle of Yavin, which is to say 15 years after Return of the Jedi, Lando meets the love of his life. Tendra Razant is her name, who was like a businesswoman, a noblewoman on and they become married and form Tendrando Arms, which helps fund the Alliance with weapons, and later when the Alliance turns against the Jedi, because I really do want to explain all these stories, but it's incredibly detailed. We're going over dozens of books here. Basically, the Alliance decides that the Jedi are no good because all of the wars are always between, all the huge conflicts are always between a light side user and a dark side user. So they say all Jedi are no good. Tendrando Arms basically helps the Jedi escape with their weapons technology. And, a few years after they've been married, Lando and Tendra give birth to Lando's son, Lando Calrissian Jr., of course, nicknamed Chance. So as of the end of the old continuity, Lando was still alive and kicking, still the gambler, still the card shark, and still, an important, vibrant member of the Star Wars universe that I think is just further rehabilitated through his many adventures outside of the movies. So, if you're interested in learning more about Lando Calrissian, I definitely recommend the Han Solo trilogy of novels. Lando's not in the first book at all. I cannot remember. It's the something. The second book is called The Hutt Gambit, and the third book is called Rebel Dawn. The first one is The Paradise Snare. That's what it is. Lando's not in Paradise Snare at all. Basically, all this stuff, their meeting and Han acquiring the Falcon all happens in The Hutt Gambit, and then Rebel Dawn is where the big betrayal happens with Han, Lando, and the Rebels. I actually think that the card game that Han wins the Falcon in is the very beginning of Rebel Dawn, now that I'm thinking about it. So, watch out for that. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, the start of this new series. I hope you enjoyed the Legend of Lando as I, run around and kill stormtroopers easily so I can play as Lando the whole time. Make sure you stay tuned for more war stories every Tuesday and Thursday by subscribing. And I'll see you guys next time. I don't know about you, but I'm full.